I've played an unholy amount of Silksong this past week, sorted through most of its secrets. At least I think so. But with all my knowledge, I wanted to gift it upon the masses. Because I'm not gonna lie, the early game really beats the fuck out of you for even existing. I'll be going over the best Silk skills, tools, crests, and some of the strongest builds I've been toying around with while I've played the game. I've timestamped all the chapters, so feel free to skip around. Okay, let's go. The easiest to rank would be the Silk skills. Now in general, this is gonna be a tough category since you likely will want to spend most of your Silk healing, at least until you get better at the game. The worst skill in my opinion is Rune Rage, which is actually a tragedy because it is by far one of the coolest looking skills in Silksong. You can find this in the slab after getting the apostate key. You do have to fight a boss though, so be warned. It's actually a really fun fight. But what makes this skill terrible is that once you use it, you basically lock yourself in place for the next 5 to 7 business days, while any bug can just beat your smug face in. Not only that, its AoE is really slow. It tries to target locations where the enemies are, but some of them move lightning fast, or honestly, they have plenty of time to get out of the way. The only thing this skill has going for it is that it's AoE, and I want to say it's close to being the highest damaging Silk skill if all those little runes actually connect. Coming in close for being the worst is Threadstorm. You can find this somewhere in Greymore, I don't know, but again this is actually a tragedy since it's Hornet's signature move almost. The reason why it's not as good as the other skills is the same as Rune Rage. Long animation, stuck in place, and kind of a short range. It also shares Rune Rage's high damage potential, 5 ticks of damage, each equivalent to 1 slash. The only reason I put this above Rune Rage is because you can control it more. But honestly, these two are duking it out for the worst skill in Silksong. However, Threadstorm has a really high ceiling, which I will talk about very soon, so don't get mad if this is your favorite skill. Alright, next. Funny enough, there are 2 more skills that are kind of in the same tax bracket. If Threadstorm and Rune Rage lived in poverty, D tier, then Silk Spear and Sharp Dart made it to the middle class, B tier level. Silk Spear is what you start out with, and it's pretty decent because it has good range, it's pretty quick, and does pretty good damage. Sharp Dart trades some of its damage for invincibility, but it's still comparable. It can be found at the end of the Wormway. Honestly, this skill would be broken if it was faster and had a bigger range, but it is what it is. I do want to say, Threadstorm can probably reach this tier only because if the boss is in its downed state, you can get off some really good damage, since you can also extend the skill by tapping or holding the button. There are more moments where it shines, but it's not consistent. Like on the flip side, there were countless moments where I would just get hit with a stray gunk shot while using the skill. There are plenty of weaknesses and it's not consistent enough for me, but if you like a bursty playstyle, it might be your thing. Since I want to say if you get the whole thing off, it's the highest damaging skill in the game. Now, the second best skill in Silksong, solidifying its place in A tier, is the Pale Nails. This can only be found in, spoiler warning, feel free to skip a few seconds. You can find this in Act 3. You have to go back to where you beat the final boss, but the fact that you can only use it deep into late game is kinda lame since it won't be helping you out much, for about 80% of the game, where you're probably struggling the most, but it is my favorite outright damaging Silk skill. Summoning 3 nails that home into a target, which makes it great since you can spam the fuck out of it, and not have to worry about aiming it at all. It's not the highest damaging skill since it's essentially 3 magic strikes from your nail, but the fact that it always hits makes up for it. It also has a short animation and you can essentially use it anywhere on the field and not worry about positioning it. But finally, the best Silk skill in the game, standing above the rest in S tier, it's Cross Stitch. Located after figuring out how the fuck to get through the mist, it is by far, in my opinion, the best skill in the game. It's a counterattack that makes you invincible for a decent while. So if you're in a pickle, you can use it to give yourself some breathing room. Not only that, but the enemies are relentless in their attacks, so you can always find a spot to use the skill. When an enemy is barreling at you, instead of running away, you can just beat the fuck out of them. That is just awesome. I think once you reach the mid game, this skill is worth going out of your way for since it will change the feel of the game for you. There are essentially no downsides unless you just whiff your deflect, and in that case, well, you're not the only one. But before we move on, it would be really cool if you liked the video, and if you subscribe, I'll even bake you a cookie. As a tiny, small, insignificant creator like me, it would really mean the world. Thank you. I want to make a lore video on Silksong, so if you're interested or want to help, feel free to join my Discord or DM me. Okay, now let's talk about the tools. In my opinion, this was the most fun I've had customizing my build in a game like Silksong. I feel like similar games in the genre don't offer the same level of expression. What better place to start than with the red tools, aka the damage type tools. Since there are so many, and in the interest of time, I'll just be throwing some of them straight into tiers while only talking about a few notable ones. The trash tier. Red tools that if I catch you using, I'm just going to sit you down in Hollow Nest instead. The straight pin. Yeah, I don't know, like why would you use this? Long pin. This is like actually terrible. The range being the worst offender because what is that? Throw that shit like you mean it. I'm gonna throw Cogwork Wheel in here too because it's kind of the same level of awful. I know a lot of people like this tool and it does really good damage, but 90% of the time it'll fly off screen. It does minimal hits, and you can barely throw it a few inches away from you before it falls into the ground like a titanium block. Basically, you won't be hitting any airborne targets. I think there are better tools that does the same thing than Cogwork Wheel. Another disappointing tool in trash tier is unfortunately the Flint Slate. I really like the idea of this tool and its effect is also really cool, but I just can't justify anyone using this over some of the other things in the game. The duration is just too short and you don't get that many uses of it. I also don't feel like the damage buff it gives isn't anything too crazy. Rosary Cannon. Yeah, it's just kind of awful. It uses rosaries, so you'd have to be a billionaire, and its damage is equivalent to hitting things with a wet piece of paper. Not only that, but you have to stand still while using it. The throwable ring also belongs here since it has awful damage, and there's a better tool that kinda does the same thing. And lastly, we have Pimpio? The portable bomb. It does really good damage, but what really holds it back is the capacity. You can only hold like 6 of these guys, and overall that reduces the amount of damage you can deal with them, especially if you miss one. Moving on to some of the decent options. If everything I just talked about is tier 3 trash, these tools are in tier 2, decent in the early game, and I wouldn't be mad if you're using them into the mid game too. The first weapon here is a 3-fold pin. It's like a pocket shotgun that comes out instantly, like almost frame 1, which makes it really smooth to use while comboing a boss. Its ammo capacity is also pretty large, letting you spam it from a distance to get decent damage in. I did this a lot to great effect, and it's great since it's one of the first tools you get. The Sting Charge is another early game tool you get which isn't bad. It does respectable damage, and you can kinda just leave it there in boss arenas for free damage. It's not as good as the 3-fold pin since you can use that shit anywhere and get value out of it easier, but the Sting Shard isn't a bad choice either. Next is Silk Shot. This weapon has a few variations depending on where you get it repaired. The Forge, the Architect, or in this area. But the worst version is definitely the one where you get it repaired by the Architect. The one I did like a dumbass. Its spread is awful, has a decently long animation, and worst of all, it uses silk as its ammo, which dips into your skills or healing. The Forge version is decent with good damage, pierces, and less animation lock, while the Ancient version, aka the best version, according to the game, acts like a sniper, which I think has the highest damage out of all the versions. It's definitely the way to go in my opinion. It works best with a certain build I'll talk about shortly. The last 2 items in tier 2 would have to be the Delver's Drill and the Volt Vessels. Both of these items have insane potential because they both do so much damage. Like the Volt Vessel smites the fuck out of anyone in its path, while the Delver's Drill gives bugs an unlicensed lobotomy. The issue really comes with how impossible they are to use. The Volt Vessels have like 0 range, don't stick to targets, and takes about an hour's time to call in the lightning strike. Even the slowest enemies can walk right out of it. While the drill can sometimes just not work, plants you into the ground, making you really vulnerable. And even if you do get it working, sometimes you can just say, nah, I'm good. But if you learn how to use them, they can be busted. Though since they're so gimmicky, I'm leaving them in tier 2. Before we move into tier 1, a step away from the best, we should talk about tax. Situationally, these can be really strong. Whenever you get locked in a room, when you're facing a grounded opponent, throw these down and you will melt their health bar. You can have up to 5 of these at once and even have them poisoned like every tool, which only makes them stronger. But again, I have to call this out since it literally does nothing against flying enemies or where the terrain itself changes. It's kinda like if you're stuck at a boss, you can try using them. I'd give tax a specialist tier since they're really good in its niche and kinda dog water otherwise. Now onto tier 1. items you should be using and that I recommend. This is equivalent to A tier, but honestly, there's only one item that truly belongs in tier 0, or S tier, and we will get to it soon. First up is Curvesicle. Very strong damage, and you get a lot of them. You can spam them since they almost have no animation to them, making them a great option. A pretty straightforward tool. You can only get this version of it very late game, and I don't really know how good the early game version of it is, but it's definitely worth using once you have it. Then we have the Flea Brew, which is kind of slept on. Being able to move faster and attack faster for a total uptime of over a minute is pretty good. Though, to be fair, it's only this high up because of how early you can get your hands on it, when you don't really have a ton of tools to use at your disposal. I used it a lot in the early game, but replaced it later on for more damage. If you find yourself brawling a lot more than using items, this could be useful, but easily gets outpaced by how much stronger some of the other red tools are that just put out straight damage. Funny enough, we also have the Plasmium Vial in tier 1 or A tier. You get it. It just instantly gives you more health, essentially 6 extra hearts at your disposal, which is really nice. Though there are some funny interactions with this item. You can technically overcap, thanks to this video explaining how you can actually replace all your hearts with it, and it just kinda slowly regenerates. Honestly, a great video finding out this neat little secret. I found another interesting interaction too. If you use a polyp pouch, you can get a poison mask which explodes after a few seconds that also does damage. It does the same if you're hit too, which is interesting. It actually affects the Flea Brew too, but I don't know if it actually changes it. I think it gives you a poisonous aura, so if enemies are near you, they get poisoned. Anyway, the final item before we talk about the best tool in all of Silksong is Conch Cutter. Honestly, this could make a case for S tier, but it's just not as good. Now, why is the Conch Cutter the actual GOAT? Because it does so many ticks of damage. Like any enemy that's a decent size, it just burns through them. So many ticks of damage, it's actually satisfying to hear. I've melted boss after boss using this tool. The damage it can output is quite insane. It falls off a little when facing enemies that are small, but the fact that it can ricochet too makes it all the better. A solid tool you should be using since you find it in the mid-game. Finally, onto the best item in Silksong. Tier 0, S tier, no competition. The Cogfly. First of all, it's adorable as fuck. It follows you, you can have like a million of them out, and they sleep with you too. What makes them great though, is that they make exploring and traveling easy as fuck, pulling up on the ops like it's nobody's business. It felt like walking around with 20 bodyguards just making the way for me. Not only that, but they are great in boss fights. Throw out 2 or 3 at a time and watch them melt the bosses. Tools are easily the best thing in the game, and Cogfly is the best of them. They also really help while being airborne or parkouring, which is all the more reason to use them. Moving on to the blue tools, passive combat upgrades that can either be offensive or defensive in nature. Let's get into it. Again, with basically trash tier tools, we have Magma Bell, which just reduces damage taken from magma and flames. Multi-binder, just don't. Honestly, you already have a long enough time healing, and I can see it being useful in certain builds though, like the Beast and the Witch who will want a longer healing period. Yeah, no, just tried it. This shit is useless, it does nothing. Weave Light. It literally makes it so when you have no silk left, you start out with more. 1 whole extra silk. I think that's all it does. Sawtooth Circlet. Yeah, it does pretty terrible damage. I don't know why you would want to do this. It also just sounds annoying. Injector Band. Just not worth the slot. It makes your bind faster, but you don't really need it. Claw Mirrors. Again, kind of not worth it since the gap between good blue tools and whatever these are is pretty wide. The damage done is also nothing to write home about, and it would just be better to use a silk skill instead if you're talking about damage. Memory Crystal. It leaves a little thing behind where if any enemy runs into it, they get damaged. Honestly, who made these tools? We need to have a little chat. Like, these items seem so cool, but I think it just needs more. Like for the Memory Crystal, if it had a taunt, that would be really nice, where the boss or enemy targets it instead of you for at least 1 hit. That would be amazing. But instead it's relegated to, don't bother using it. Quick Sling. Horrendously trash. I was excited that this might break the game since it doubles the number of tools thrown, but it still uses the durability as if you did use 2 of that tool. Basically, this tool is the equivalent of pressing 1 button again. Who is this for? Snitch Pick. This was just a scam. For 1,000 clams, you get this shit, which is just, it's bad. Then we have Wispfire Lantern. Again, I have to say, why? It just automatically spends your silk when you're near enemies. It just says, I think I'll take that, and dive bombs the nearest lost soul. Pin Badge. It reduces charge time of a charged needle strike. You are not using the charge attack enough for this. And finally, the Egg of Flelia. Decreases the cost of silk skills while your health is full. First of all, it decreases the skill cost by 1 silk. So instead of 4 silk, it costs 3. Also, I know you're not fighting at max health long enough for this to matter. Okay, now that we talked about basically what not to use, what are some better options? These still aren't that good, but they aren't like awful. Again, the gap between these and the best is still pretty vast. Regardless, let's go over them. In tier 2, or C tier honestly, we have Warding Bell. Now, it sounds really good. It sounds like it'll protect your ass while you heal, but it actually just negates 1 instance of damage and still cancels your heal, which is just kinda sad. Not as bad as the ones we just talked about, but we can do better. Reserve Bind. Basically a free heal that gets used when you don't have enough silk to heal normally, but once you do use it in that way, it breaks and has to be repaired at the bench. Not awful, but not great either. Longclaw. Honestly, this is pretty horrid. I think there's a fixed distance that it extends your range by, but it's barely noticeable. Its saving grace is the Shaman Crest, because the increased range on that one feels really nice, but we'll get there soon. Wreath of Purity. Honestly would be an S tier if it didn't break, but still easily the best of tier 2/C tier because of how fucking annoying Biowater is to navigate. It's okay though, we finally make it to tier 1, the A tier level blue tools. It's basically the only thing you should be using. The worst of the best is Spool Extender. It allows Hornet to store an extra 3 silk, which is actually pretty nice. It's best for a mage build and kind of falls off otherwise, but still it's one of the more useful blue tools in Silksong. In the same vein, we have Fractured Mask, which lets you tank 1 critical hit and still stand. It can be clutch if you feel like you're 1 hit away from winning, and you can get this decently early, so it can help with the early game. However, towards the middle and end game, I would lean away from this and into tools that boost your damage or have better benefits, like Volt Filament, the only buffer for silk skills. It adds an electrical charge to your attacks and makes them look sick as fuck. However, it's only really useful if the skills you're using are Threadstorm or Cross Stitch. It boosts the damage of Threadstorm by 15% and 20% for Cross Stitch. It falls off pretty hard for the other skills since there aren't multi-hits like Threadstorm or Cross Stitch, but since low-key Cross Stitch is the best skill in the game, this tool is worth it. Making it to the top 2 is Polyp Pouch. A wise man once said, I have no idea if this is a DPS gain, but I'll still use it religiously, is how I also feel about this item. It turns everything purple, which is really nice. The Flint Slate, the Brew, the File, combine them and become a toxic being. From my understanding, poison does 3 ticks of damage, 4 damage each for a total of 12 damage. You can't stack it or extend the duration, but each time you inflict poison, the timer resets. Honestly, it doesn't sound amazing, but it looks cool. And with the options you have, you might as well throw this on there. Chip damage throughout a fight can end up being a large amount. But now the best blue tool in Silksong is the Druid's Eyes, specifically the upgraded version. It's just so good. The amount of silk you get back is really nice. I think it equates to around 1 silk per hit, which still really goes a long way towards silk regeneration. The amount of silk this thing generates throughout a fight is mind-boggling. Obviously, if you're amazing at the game and never get hit, you'd probably prefer something that allows for more damage, but to be honest, a lot of the blue tools are terrible. Okay, finally we can talk about the yellow tools. Kind of the same thing as blue tools, but we also have exploration perks. As usual, starting off with the worst is, honestly there's only one yellow tool that you need, and it's gambling. The magnetic dice are amazing. They have a chance to just ignore a hit, which is by far the best any yellow tool can offer. Most of them are lukewarm exploration help, are completely terrible. If you wanted to use more yellow tools, I always had the compass equipped and the weighted belt. It's finally time. The crests, the most expressive part of Silksong. I'll be ranking them from worst to best and giving out the best builds for each. Ready? Starting off, the worst crest in Silksong is, to no one's surprise, the Beast Crest. There are a couple things wrong with this thing. First of all, there are no blue slots. The down attack is whatever this is, and worst of all, the heal is a lifesteal instead. Now that sounds really cool, but it's kind of just a nerf. You have to hit the enemy to heal, and it still takes time to activate, and the effect wears off once you heal 3 masks. I think this is kind of unnecessary. It would be cool if instead of just 3 masks it was 5, because essentially you're risking it all for nothing. You could have just gotten 3 masks for free, but now you have to hit the boss instead. I think it also would be really cool if it gave Hornet a strength buff. The duration being a bit longer would help, but that might be a bit overkill with everything else that I talked about. But I don't think there's a single soul that's playing with the Beast Crest, and if they are, they don't need me to tell them what to build. In 6th place, we have the Witch Crest, which makes me really sad because it has one of the most elegant needle movesets in the game, and its down attack has this really cool animation to it. I really wish it was better, but unfortunately, its heal holds it back a lot. The Witch has 2 red slots and 3 blue slots, which also plays a part in why it's not ranked higher, since having no yellow slots at all makes exploring extremely difficult. I think each crest needs at least 1. However, unlike the Beast Crest, the Witch Crest has a really specific niche that it excels at. The rooms where you get trapped in and surrounded by countless enemies, that's where I feel like this shines. Its heal is essentially an AoE damage dealer that also heals. Actually, you kind of need to deal damage to heal like the Beast Crest. But the build I would go for is a full brawling build. Plasmium File, Cogfly, Druid's Eye, Paula Poison, Claw Mirrors. Yeah, that bad item I talked about earlier, it works here since you're already doing damage with your heal. Might as well do more damage. If you're fully upgraded, you will get extra slots for free, 1 blue and 1 yellow. To get these, you need to talk to Ava, and I'm not sure what the exact requirements are, but I think it's tied to how many crests you have and how many nodes you've unlocked on the crests themselves. So with the extra slots, I would throw on honestly any of the mid blue tools. Unfortunately, like before, most of the blue tools aren't that good. Reserve Bind actually works here pretty well, Fractured Mask, and even maybe Memory Crystal for the fun of it. This is probably the strongest slamming your head into the enemy's build you can make, but it's only really good in those specific scenarios where you're getting surrounded. I don't think you'd want to use a soul skill most of the time since the point of the build is to face tank and spam heal, but we might as well lean into the ball of fire that we are and use Threadstorm. Now that we talked about the C tier crests, let's move up a level and talk about the B tier crests. Starting us off is Hunter, the most basic you can get, the one you start the game with. You can also upgrade this crest a total of 2 times, and its passive ability is something I personally haven't witnessed since I suck at the game. The more you attack, this little meter fills up, making your attacks stronger, but if you get hit, the meter resets. Its needle moveset is classic. Its down attack is also something I really like since it gives you extra movement and the ability to position around the boss. Sometimes you don't want to be right above an enemy since they might have an attack that covers that area, and in this way you can keep doing circles around the boss and not get caught as easily. Its heal is a basic 3 mask heal and nothing special. The perfect blank canvas of a crest, so the tools I'd use are all-rounders as well. With 2 red, blue, and yellow tools, I would use Cogfly and Conch Cutter for the red tools, whatever you like using for extra damage. Volt Filament or Polyp Pouch for sure, and if you have a 3rd slot, Druid Eyes could be good, but you could easily swap it out for Spool Extender if you're a boss and feel like you won't be taking any damage. As for the Silk skill, you can't go wrong with Cross Stitch to keep up the pressure. Next and 4th, we have the Wanderer Crest. It's basically the same thing from the original Hollow Knight, extremely short range attacks, but it makes up for it with higher attack speed. It has a classic down attack which makes traversing and dealing with enemies easier, and it is by far the best crest to use when exploring. 3 yellow, 2 blue, and 1 red slot makes it a very solid crest to use. I would throw on Cogfly because they are amazing to fly around with while exploring, Druid's Eye, Fractured Mask, Volt Filament for the blue tools, and for the yellow tools, whatever helps you explore. You can use stuff like the Ascendant Grip, Magnetic Brooch, anything really. The only ones I definitely want are Magnetic Dice and Compass, and as for the skill, I'd use Silk Spear until you've unlocked Cross Stitch. Since the range for Wanderer is so short, you will be in the enemy's face often, which is why the extra range like Silk Spear is worth it, or a parry to give you some breathing room while doing damage. But I already talked about the best skills to use in general, so pick your poison. The heal is also the same basic heal as the Hunter. But finally, moving into the big 3, A tier crests. First we have the Shaman crest. I feel like I'm being pretty generous putting it this high, but I really like the style. The needle moveset is by far the best in the game. The incredible range it provides, simplistic down attack with the extra range, makes it really good for traversing and in general being out of the range for when boss attacks hit above their head. A really good dash attack that lets you reposition a bit, and the best heavy attack to boot, though I don't know anyone that uses smash attacks. The Shaman crest is definitely for silk skills because it makes them stronger, but not equally. Silk Spear, Sharp Dart, and Rune Rage all kind of get insignificantly buffed by it, but Pale Nails gets around a 50% damage increase, Cross Stitch gets close to a 77% damage increase, and Threadstorm also gets a 70% damage increase. It's looking like a pretty broken crest. Like, why isn't this the best? I'll tell you. You get to equip a whopping 3 silk skills with this crest, but no red tools. The reason why this sucks is because skills have nothing on tools. The tools can output crazy amounts of damage with relatively low cost, so having none of them is a pretty big blow. The second thing is the heal. For some reason, the Shaman needs to ground itself when it needs to heal. Like, why the fuck? This makes healing a bit more painful than normal, especially since a lot of the time the ground is covered in hazards or there is no ground at all. You can kinda just hit an enemy with the heal, but I doubt it stuns bigger enemies, so you're kinda screwed anyway. This crest has really high highs and pretty significant lows, but if that's okay with you and you want to play a mage-like build, this is the crest for you. As for the build itself, for the blue tools, I have Druid's Eyes, Long Claws to make the range bigger, as it's the only crest where I can actually feel the range increase, and it feels incredible. Of course, Volt Filaments, since 2 of the skills we will be using are decently buffed by it, and as for the best skills to use, it's the only 3 that are actually decently buffed by it: Pale Nails, Cross Stitch, and Threadstorm. It kinda works out perfectly with a ranged damage dealing skill, a counter, and an AoE nuke. Oh, I forgot another reason why this crest isn't amazing: the lack of a yellow tool slot. But since you can only get this in the endgame, you probably have these extra slots unlocked, which is where you could slot a compass in or the dice if you're fighting a boss. But now, the top 2. In second, we have the fucking Architect, heavily carried by the fact that the red tools can put out insane amounts of damage. You can use 3 of them, but it replaces the silk skills completely. Its needle moveset is also really unique. The dash attack looks nice, and the regular attacks are multi-hit. If you land all of them, they do more damage than a regular attack from any other crest. My only issue with it is the down attack. It lacks range if you don't charge it up, and charging it takes a second, which is a really long time in a fast-paced fight. But it more than makes up for it for the John Wick type arsenal you will be bringing to the function. Its heal is a standard heal, but you can also instead fix all your tools mid-fight, or just any time in general, which is kinda nice because this lets you sit back and dodge while just throwing a metric ton of garbage towards anyone who's in your way. So let's talk about the build. Cogfly, obviously, Conch Cutter, which is absolutely busted, and the third slot is more varied. It could be the laser gun, tacks if you can use those effectively, which you should do by the way. Any chance you get where you can abuse them, do it. Curvesicle, you get the idea, your favorite damaging item. It's also great since this crest lets you bring 2 yellow and 2 blue tools on top of all of this. So you'd bring Polyp Pouch, Druid Eyes, and whatever third option you like if you have the extra slots unlocked. For the yellow tools I used Weighted Belt and Dice. The Compass too because I'm directionally challenged. And with that, you're a walking menace. If this is your playstyle, it's strong. But finally, onto the last crest, and in my opinion, the best. It's the Reaper crest. Man, is it good. Not only because I think it's a better version of a balanced crest like the Hunter, mixing the strengths of both Architect and Shaman, but also because you can get your hands on this early in the game. The moveset is great, longer range so you can position yourself safer, a normal down attack to help you with traversing the world of Silksong. Its heal is also amazing since for a while after you use it, you get a buff that lets you gain extra silk per attack, which is by far the best heal effect in the game. On top of that, it has a very balanced array of tool slots, 2 of each. I would throw in Cogfly and Conch Cutter or your favorite red tool, the weighted dice and belt, the compass if you can, and for the blue tools, Druid's Eye and Poison Pouch to give your tools an edge. I also threw in Volt Filament because I'm a cross-stitch spammer, which is also what I used on this crest. It makes for an extremely well-rounded build, tools to give you a breather, and a balanced fighting style if you need to get in and get your hands dirty. And with that, you've made it to the end of the video. I hope this helped you decide on what items to use and what build you want to lean into. Feel free to experiment and let me know in the comments what you used, since I may have missed something. If you want to see more Silksong content like a lore video or a challenge run, let me know by leaving a like, and if you subscribe, I think you're really cute. Until next time, I hope to see you there.